Like you saw in the materials beforehand, the webinar we're working on today is NetSuite and Flxpoint. Title from preferred vendor to dynamic order routing. We'll get into what that actually means. A lot of what we're covering here is drop shipping within NetSuite, along with the challenges that come along with that. So you'll hear a lot of dropship focused things, but it also goes towards just vendor procurement in general, NetSuite operations in general. So we'll cover a lot of those challenges here with dropshipping and NetSuite. Then we'll get into how we can combat those challenges, right? Looking at things like automation, more dynamic order routing, and then a good old build versus buy scenario on what makes sense in terms of automating some of those processes in NetSuite. Cool. So without further ado, diving in here to the challenges that we hear all the time when talking to our customers, our prospects about adding dropship operations to NetSuite. So to set the stage here, the pillars that I kind of view with dropshipping and NetSuite are up on the screen here. Just the different segmented areas that we have to tackle in order to efficiently dropship with NetSuite. So first things first, we got to create item records inside of NetSuite. With dropshipping, there's high volumes and specific configurations that you need to create these item records, and that can be a serious headache. And then on the PO generation side, the name of our webinar is really speaking to this pillar right here. But a big pain point inside of NetSuite when trying to automatically generate purchase orders for e-commerce orders that are being placed. Is a really, really rigid preferred vendor logic that NetSuite has. I'm going to talk about that a ton, but really at heart, it's just limiting automation and the ability to have your business logic in place for routing orders to vendors. And then finally, basically the order procurement lifecycle. So actually placing orders with vendors, not just generating those POs, but placing the order, getting tracking information back to create item fulfillment records, getting invoices in to create vendor bills. The biggest pain point with that entire process is just really limited connection integration options to your vendors to send them orders and get those details back. So in a nutshell, the high SKU counts and hopefully high order volumes that comes with adding drop shipping to your NetSuite setup. It's manual, it's configuration heavy, and it's something that's hard to manage with what NetSuite offers out of the box. Just a visual representation of what I was just discussing, but in a nutshell, and we're going to get into each of these little pain points. But in a nutshell, the first thing that we run into is I have all these SKUs and items from my vendors that I might sell on my website, but I might not. But I don't have a good browsing experience to determine, hey, what do I want to sell? What do I want to filter out before I'm creating a ton of item records inside of NetSuite? And along with creating these item records, it's manual. It's manual and error prone to do this in bulk. And with dropshipping does come bulk. So, with that item record creation, just the inability to really browse between multiple vendors' inventories before creating those item records makes it so that you have to create a ton of item records, which is hard to do in bulk. Cool. And then on the ordering side of things, on the lower half of my diagram here, when an order comes in from a sales channel, first things first, there's no native e-com sales channel connector. So that's the first pain point for orders being placed. There are obviously apps and tools out there to transmit order data from the channel into NetSuite to create a sales order, but it's not native. And then again, you'll hear me mention this a few times, but if I do want NetSuite to go ahead and cut a purchase order for me when that sales order comes in, we're stuck with preferred vendor routing, where I can pick one single preferred vendor, and that's who the PO goes to, limiting really being able to scale this operation up. Cool. And then when I actually want to, like I said earlier, send the order out, get tracking and invoice data back, just not a lot of built-in tools inside of NetSuite to do that. Cool. So let's dive on into the actual problems here in some more detail. So the first problem that I've talked about here, like I said, creating item records is really the first step to dropshipping in NetSuite. So we'll start there. And really what the problem we're dealing with here is that dropshipping it's a different flow from traditional retail. When we're dropshipping, it's all about volume in terms of the SKUs that in order road as well, which we'll get into. But in in the thousands, hundreds of thousands, I've seen it in millions, stuff like that. With creating these records brings a whole lot more on the complexity side of things. It is there. there are different areas of the item that you need to enable when you're drop shipping that you wouldn't with traditional retail. So really need to be accurate because if you are error prone, it can lead to those downstream order issues, reconciliation issues that we obviously want to avoid. And then, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, unlike traditional retail where, this is all my own inventory, I know I'm going to want to sell this on my e-commerce website, or I have a set list of items that I want to sell. A lot of times when you're dealing with dropship, you want to be able to filter out items that you don't plan on selling from particular vendors, or else you might just be creating millions, hundreds of thousands of item records for stuff that you're not even selling, which obviously is work that doesn't need to be done. So having a good filtering system is key. And then finally, like I said earlier, there are specific fields that need to be configured when you're an item record for a dropship item. You need to, like I said earlier, you need to predefine that preferred vendor. So you need to tell NetSuite at least one vendor that can fulfill the item a purchase. And if you have multiple vendors, might talk about, that's something that you need to add on that item record tail, and again, calling out which that specific preferred is. And then you will, once you enable your account, which I'll get into a little bit later as well, to allow dropship or special order items. That's another field you need to create on every single item record or define on every single item record. So kind of on the top of my screen here, with each item record in NetSuite, once we enable this feature, we have to select that it's a dropship item, right? We can also select if it's a special order item. The main difference there between a dropship item, special order, dropship is going to be sent directly from the vendor to the end customer. A special order item in NetSuite, we call it cross-docking in Flexpoint, but that's something where you are going to bring an order or multiple orders into your own fulfillment center, package those up, and then send them out to the end customer yourself. So both of those come with their own downstream effects. Like I said, receiving an item into inventory for a special order item versus never receiving an item into inventory for a dropship item can obviously have downstream effects on your general ledger. So it's something that being error prone is something that we just really can't handle when it comes to this massive volume of dropship SKUs. So obviously a big problem here, managing these item records and then keeping them accurate. What we found, doing some sleuthing online is, and honestly just setting this up ourselves, but it can take 5 to 15, 20 minutes to create a single item record in NetSuite. You can do some things in bulk with spreadsheet uploads too, but with selecting every single item that you need to, it's a long process. And like I said, when you're dealing with the volume that comes along with dropshipping, it's something that just becomes untenable. So moving on from that first item record creation and configuration problem, we'll go to the next one. And obviously we'll have ways that we can get around and combat all of these, but just focusing on each pain point to start here. Cool. So the number 2 problem here, it's really just made your operations more complex by adding dropship. At the end of the game, you're adding more SKUs, you're hoping to have more orders come in. There's just more complexity, different areas of NetSuite that need to be managed. So especially, when it comes to overlapping items, right? So you hear me say overlap a good amount, but in dropship, it's very common that I'm going to sell the same items that my drop shippers have, or multiple drop shippers have the same units of SKUs in stock. So it's something that we want to be able to, if we can, manage that overlap. Hey, I have 3 vendors that can sell this same item. How do I merchandise that? How do I route orders when they come in? So within NetSuite, and again, we kind of named the presentation after this main pain point. So this is something that we really feel is holding a lot of people back from either starting with dropshipping in NetSuite or really scaling it up. But at the end of the day, NetSuite's only automation that they allow is on my screen here for creating purchase orders. And what you see here is this is just a feature you enable when you first want to start, adding dropship to your NetSuite setup. But literally the only automation you can do from an order coming in, a sales order coming in from your e-commerce sales channel to cutting a purchase order in NetSuite is to set it based on the preferred vendor. So right there, that's limiting you in how we're routing these orders, right? So there's no ability to route based on your actual business logic. Again, this is really for that overlap example where I want to pick and choose which vendor places the order. There's not necessarily always a concept of I have one preferred vendor. A lot of business logic can be in place to denote who should be getting your orders. Margins is a key one, right? A lot of times our customers tell us, hey, I don't want to send it to a preferred vendor. My preferred vendor is my least expensive vendor. And that changes, right? With shipping costs, with freight charges, with just vendors changing their price points. You want to have, if possible, a live view of all of that changing cost data to know, hey, let's send the order to the vendor that's going to get me the best margin. So NetSuite does not have that out of the box. Same thing with managing split orders. Each item on that preferred vendor item configuration that I was talking about, you say you're one preferred vendor. So when a multi-unit, a multi-line item order comes in from the sales channel, there's not really any ability to say, hey, I want to protect, not having to ship this out from multiple entities. I want to deprioritize solutions that are split orders. Again, something NetSuite doesn't provide. It's going to split that order no matter what if there's two different preferred vendors that are going to be filling the order. And then, maybe I want to route based on delivery times. Distance to my end customer is key for a lot of our customers, and it usually affects your shipping charges too. So that's something where, again, NetSuite is just going to cut it to that preferred vendor, not give you the ability to route on really any other factor. So that can be very limiting. A lot of people I've talked to, are weary of getting into dropship with NetSuite for that reason of, hey, I have my own rules I need to get in place to route to the appropriate vendor when an order comes in. I don't want to have to go back to every purchase order, manually review it, especially when we're dealing with dropship volume. Definitely a big problem to solve is that kind of single vendor dependency that we're inside of NetSuite when it comes to cutting purchase orders. Cool. Then outside of that, it's like everything else in NetSuite that I'm talking about. It is a cumbersome process just to move sales orders and purchase orders through their life cycle. So manual steps of approving sales orders before a purchase order is generated. POs can be auto-generated, but again, just for that single preferred vendor. But you want to make sure you approve them. You have to mark them as shipped and make sure you don't receive them, right? So all these little things that go with dropshipping, I'm not receiving them to my inventory like I would for a kind of normal retail scenario. Making it, again, error prone. Just something that if human intervention is performing all these approvals and changes. Hey, I need to change who that vendor was. I don't like the preferred vendor that NetSuite assigned. All of that can lead to, like I said earlier, downstream effects and inaccuracies. And then something that almost every customer I've talked to struggles with is just cross-referencing purchase order numbers. Again, without like a true automation system, things just happening manually. It's really hard to have the same order number that came from my Shopify, BigCommerce, Amazon channel that lives inside of NetSuite that my vendors receive, so I can look up across all these different systems. Hey, what's my order? What's my purchase order? So all these things, really goes into the complexities that come with just cutting purchase orders, routing to particular vendors inside of NetSuite. And just a quick video here this is just a single purchase order, a single approval process, taking something from pending approval into an approved status. There's 6, 7, 8 clicks on each one of these orders. Again, the name of the game here with dropship is to automate and to get volumes. So if we're doing all of this manually, it's taking somebody hours and hours of work to truly move those things around. Cool. All right, so going into problem number 3 here. So this is really what I'm talking about, the full order and procurement lifecycle. So the actual placing of orders with the vendors, getting tracking information in, reconciliation information in, getting invoices in and created as vendor bills inside of NetSuite. The final challenge is a big one as well. But really what it comes down to is, if I'm scaling with multiple dropship vendors, again, one dropship vendor is great, but name of the game is volume. I want to scale. I want to grow this operation and add vendors that I think make sense as they find them. Each of those vendors is going to have, different requirements in terms of how they can connect, how they can send you inventory data, how they can receive orders and give you tracking. They're all going to, have their own preferences, their own, technical limitations. So dealing with each of those different vendors is cumbersome. And then, like we talked about earlier, not just on that kind of purchase order creation, but the entire life cycle of sending an order to a vendor, getting item receipts in, well, once they send the tracking information, creating vendor bills once invoices come in from those vendors. So again, just a ton of manual approvals and updating that need to be done throughout that whole life cycle. And again, in bulk, super time consuming. And then finally, really limited native built-in vendor and sales channel integration tools inside of NetSuite. They have basically limited to the ability to send an email to your vendor when an order comes in. I think they also have fax options. I don't know that anybody uses those anymore, but very limited in terms of, hey, how can I send my vendor an order? If I'm not going to email them an order, there's nothing built in order to send orders out. So almost everyone we talk to, if they want to add dropship, if they want to add vendors in general to their NetSuite instance, they're doing custom development work. They're doing things with suite scripts that we'll get into. They're building API or EDI integrations, and that's really the only option that you have. Maybe hiring a third-party developer to perform the same, which can get pretty costly and time-consuming. So again, it's all about scaling here. The biggest problem we're trying to solve is hey, I'm not just working with one vendor. I'm working with multiple, and they're all different. And I want, it's hard to manage all of those without one kind of centralized location. Cool. And then, like I said earlier, similar to the last little clip here, but 10, 15 clicks in order to go review an item fulfillment record, move it up to a different status. If I'm adding the shipping information manually, I'm copying and pasting that into my item fulfillment. So just a ton of manual work. Again, manual work is time consuming, but it also brings inaccuracies, right? So yeah, I think those are the key challenges. We want to get in front of everybody here in the first portion of the webinar. But really, in a nutshell, like I've said a couple times here, adding dropship operations it brings challenges when it comes to scaling, when it comes to doing that efficiently. There's high volumes everywhere in terms of item records, all the different order records that you need to do for fulfillment, and brand new requirements if you haven't done it before. That you're doing for the first time. So real quick recap, item record setup, time consuming, very error prone. There's no way to browse vendor inventory in NetSuite before I'm going to create those item records and actually do my merchandising to get out to the end sales channel. Where you hear it a ton, but rigid vendor onboarding, preferred routing is the only preferred vendor routing is the only thing that comes out of the box. And then manual work, approval, status changes, tracking entry. It's just not sustainable in a dropship landscape with the amount of orders that you're going to be processing through. And then again, limited out-of-the-box options for actually placing orders, getting tracking information back. And something I covered a little bit earlier, but still a pain point, something that can be solved through plugins and apps, but still something that needs to be solved is there's, again, no built-in sales channel or marketplace connector. So again, you need to look into a system that will take order data to and from NetSuite coming from your sales channel, whether that's a marketplace like Amazon and Walmart, eBay, or if it's your own storefront. Cool. So enough of the challenges. Let's talk about how we can overcome them, right? So one of the biggest things we can do here to combat a lot of what I've talked about is automation. So gaining that efficiency through automating processes, getting rid of some of that human error that I've mentioned a few times. So yeah, some of the benefits here of automating when it comes to this dropship landscape, it's what I've said before. We can there are tools like Flxpoint that can filter out items that you don't plan on selling before you're creating item records and merchandising. So again, just when I have two options, one is to create 1 million item records on NetSuite, even though I'm only selling about half of that inventory, a quarter of that inventory. Or do I just want to create a quarter of those item records right off the gate? Everything I have inside of my NetSuite instance as an item record is something I plan on selling. So yeah, a really good way through automation to automatically filter down to the products that you want to sell. And I'll get into some ways to do that. Cool. And then along with that, so not just filtering before creating those item records, but again, with automation, we can create those item records in bulk. We saw earlier, how manual of a process it can be to add an item record, to make sure it's marked as a dropship only item or a special order item. Make sure that you're adding any sort of vendors to the mix and their price points. All of that is very, very time consuming in bulk and very, very error prone. So yeah, with automation, we want to be able to, if it's a repeatable process, a programmatic process, there's a lot less mistakes that can be made with, not selecting the appropriate field here and there, or doing the same thing each and every time, essentially. And then, yeah, and this next point, it's more of just a point for dropship in general. But a huge benefit of adding dropship automation is increase your cash on hand. I don't have to hold all of this inventory in my warehouse. I can wait until, especially for like the slow moving inventory or something, I'm just not sure. Maybe it's a new vendor, new product line I haven't sold before, and I don't know how fast it's going to sell. But let's increase our cash on hand by not holding all of that inventory. I don't with dropship, you don't have to pay the vendor until you get paid by your customer. And again, that's where the volume comes in. Their margins are going to be smaller with dropship, but we want to keep the volume play going to just have a nice steady revenue stream. So again, use that cash elsewhere, use it on marketing, use it on the items that do sell really fast that you do want to hold in stock, as opposed to inflating kind of the cash you have on hand there with dropship inventory. Cool. And then finally, an automated order lifecycle. This is huge. Something where, with how many approvals and item records need to be created, order records that need to be created, automating that process, that lifecycle, all the diagrams that I was showing and I'll get into, can be huge. Again, same thing with like I said, with the item creation. It's something that it's done a lot faster because it's done in an automated API fashion in a lot of cases. But B, it's more accurate. We're doing the same thing programmatically each and every time. So when I'm creating purchase orders, when I'm getting the item fulfillments in, when I'm getting invoices in, each of those opportunities is a time where an error can be made by somebody manually entering something. So let's go ahead and automate it and make sure we correct any of those mistakes. Cool. So this is our first view of Flxpoint here. So again, some of the solutions that I'm going to mention can be solved by Flxpoint. That's why we're here. But it's this first view I wanted to showcase. This is our what we call our digital product catalog inside of Flxpoint. This is what I recommend to people who want to look through dropship inventory before deciding that they actually want to merchandise it, before they actually want to create the item records inside of NetSuite. So, inside of Flxpoint, things like save filters, things like being able to search for particular SKUs, search for particular items, or just search for items that meet my standards is something that we can do in an automated fashion here. So very commonly in Flxpoint, we have customers that will set up these basically standard data sets where if it does not meet the criteria you see on my screen, and you can make your own custom criteria for what you consider eligible for selling from your drop shippers, we're going to filter everything else out. So with like I said, an automated process of bringing new items in from the vendor, right? I don't have to look up through a bunch of vendor SKU lists of, hey, do they have new items in? Is that something I want to sell? Again, we can always be looking out for that with an automated way to connect to your vendors, bring their inventory and product data into our digital product catalog, and then let you filter out anything you don't want to sell before creating those item records on NetSuite. So yeah, a big tool that Flxpoint offers is curating your product catalog and then automatically creating those item records inside of NetSuite. Again, combats a lot of what I was talking about earlier with the manual item creation of items that you're not going to sell in the first place, and then errors that go along with that. We can make sure through our automation that we are setting items up as dropship items so that they're properly accounted for inside of your inventory. And then, yeah, just going back real quick. So the next slide can get complex. So I'm gonna walk through it. But really, what I'm going to be talking about is the bullet number 4 here: the automatic sales order and purchase order creation, order fulfillment lifecycle. Basically, everything that goes in with after the inventory record has been created and orders start to flow in is a big area where Flxpoint sets itself apart. I mean, this is our bread and butter. We do this all day long. And something that adds a ton of value through automation. So just walking it through simply, I won't dive into every single point on this slide here, but Flxpoint can get the order directly in from your sales channel. Previously, I mentioned, hey, you need some sort of connector between sales channel and NetSuite. NetSuite does not have them natively. Flxpoint can act as that and import the order directly from your sales channel. And then what we're going to do is route it. I'll get into what that means and the value that unlocks. But at the end of the day, we're automating the process of sending orders to vendors as well as creating sales orders and purchase orders on NetSuite. So again, the quick screen recording I had earlier of clicking through 6, 7, 8 areas of NetSuite just to get one order moved through the life cycle. That's what this screen shows, but it's all done automatically. So again, we're going to send orders to vendors. We're also going to tell NetSuite that there's a sales order and a purchase order on the way. So right there, we've bridged the gap between the sales channel and NetSuite. And then once we send the orders to the vendor, and again, Flxpoint has a ton of pre-built ways to do that, which I'll get into. But once we've sent the orders to the vendor, we want to get tracking information back. And once we do, we want to tell NetSuite. We can get item receipts, item fulfillments created in NetSuite automatically based on tracking information coming back from your vendors or your internal warehouse. You'll see on my diagram here, there is, Flxpoint handles internal warehousing and 3PLs really well too. But again, just focusing on the dropship piece for the time being here. Cool. So yeah, this diagram is just the automated flow of order, the order lifecycle. At the end of the day, we're also going to sync the tracking back to your end sales channel, really just owning that entire order lifecycle from start to finish, and can be as automated as you want. Cool. So yeah, that last slide all about automation. How automation can combat some of the pain points that we talked to earlier in the presentation here. The next area, again, a key focus. This is one of the biggest areas to improve or to maybe start with your NetSuite dropshipping. It's why we named the webinar what we did, but adding dynamic multi-supplier order routing to your dropship setup, it can be a huge game changer. Like I said, this is all about going from that rigid kind of preferred vendor purchase order logic inside of NetSuite to a much more dynamic approach to deciding which vendors can fulfill orders for you. So what dynamic order routing can do, right? So it's really the concept of finding overlapping items. I have more than one vendor that can fulfill this order for me. Who should get it? Maybe my warehouse can fulfill it. They can be included in the mix of, hey, who should get it? But we're always going to pick who's best for fulfillment, whether that is based on who has it available. It's always a good thing. Based on margins, based on a preference. If you do say, hey, I want to prioritize my warehouse over any vendors, dynamic order routing can assist with that. Again, this is something that Flxpoint does all day long. I like to think of our order routing engine as one of the best features that we offer our customers. So that really is an area we can bridge the gap to say, hey, we can get away from that preferred vendor order routing and having to go back and change who I routed an order to, and I can really get into picking the very best vendor for my fulfillment. And then having this like automated order routing, it's much more scalable and flexible, right? I can handle thousands of orders between all sorts of different vendors and rely on the automation to send the order to the right vendor, as opposed to having to manually review every order. Maybe I have to go back, and what a lot of the NetSuite users we talk to are doing today are allowing NetSuite to generate a purchase order, but then 90% of the time they have to go in and change it. They have to check, hey, who actually has this in stock? Did it get routed to the right vendor? Is it still at a good price point for me? So all those things are hard to maintain and kind of keep track of. So if we have an automated way to know what the vendor's inventory is, know what their cost data is, we can scale much easier with being able to route things based on true dynamic business logic here. Another thing that it's going to do is reduce back orders and overselling. Always a good thing. Again, with high order volumes, with adding dropship operations, we really need a system that can tell the end sales channel, tell NetSuite what is constantly available from each vendor, and change who gets the order routed to them based on who's in stock. Nothing worse than cutting a purchase order out to a vendor. They come back to you, say, hey, no, we no longer have that. Now we got to tell the end customer, we can't fulfill this order. Now I have to go switch up my purchase order, do some manual work to get a new vendor to fulfill it. So again, being able to dynamically order out, reduces the need for, holding back orders, canceling orders from your customer. One of the biggest ones, protect margins. A lot of times I talk to customers about, hey, what is your preference on, how we should route an order? If multiple entities could fulfill this order for you, who should get it? Almost always I hear whoever's cheapest, right? That's not always the case, but a lot of times we just want to protect our margins. Vendors can change prices based on their terms with manufacturers. Having a system that constantly keeps your vendor's inventory updated from a cost and a quantity perspective, so that when an order does come in, we're sending it to the vendor who has it in stock, who maybe can fulfill the entirety of the order, not have to do any split orders, is really a way to make sure you're making the most money on every single dropship order. Again, what some people say, why they haven't added dropship to their NetSuite interface just yet is, they don't trust that they're going to be able to make as much money as they'd like to. Again, because they don't have this built-in kind of margin protection logic of sending the order to who will get it to you for the very best rate, it can limit you. Cool. And then, like I've talked about a few times, changing vendors. Errors come along with that. If NetSuite does its automated purchase order assignment and it's to your preferred vendor, and you need to change it for one reason or another, it's too far away from my end customer, that vendor's now out of stock, the vendor's terms have changed and we don't want to order through them anymore. It's something that I have to go back to NetSuite, change the purchase order. If that purchase order was already sent out, I got to change a lot of other records. So again, manual intervention, it's time consuming and it's error prone. So it's a common theme of what we're talking about here. We really want to, through automation, through dynamic order routing, reduce errors, reduce manual input. Cool. And again, just another graphical representation of how Flxpoint helps with this. So you'll see here Flxpoint at the center of our diagram. What we're looking to do is combine the quantities from all of your vendors into an aggregated listing view. So we can be aware of every single item that your vendors have, that maybe you house in your own 3PL warehouses. Like I said, I know a lot of this presentation is dropship and vendor specific. We know NetSuite deals a lot, not in dropship, they deal with a lot of internal warehousing, 3PL operations, and so does Flxpoint. So again, adding those 3PL, those internal warehouse operations to the dropship network is something that Flxpoint helps a ton with here. But in general, like I said, with this dynamic order routing I'm talking about, we have the ability that once an order comes in to check through dropship vendors, check through 3PL warehouses, check through your internal warehouse to determine who should get the order based on almost any piece of business logic you can think of, instead of just relying on hey, this is my one preferred vendor. And obviously, I wanted to include NetSuite and RF Smart as an internal warehouse on this graphic, just from the standpoint of, like I said, we know that our customers don't just dropship. Hybrid fulfillment being a very key player here, something that Flxpoint and NetSuite help a ton with. So we treat NetSuite almost as your internal warehouse in a lot of cases, knowing that your warehouse management can happen there. And then again, Flxpoint is obviously not just handling the procurement of these orders and all the inventory details, but we need to pass all of the information, the good order data, the good inventory data that we have into your ERP, into NetSuite. So just a graphical representation of what Flxpoint does, but definitely a focus on how we can dynamically route those orders based on all of the, I call them sources, fulfillment sources you can see on the left-hand side of your screen there. All right, so what I wanted to kind of get into with the end of the presentation here, I don't want to say that there's no way outside of Flxpoint to automate some of these processes, right? To perform dynamic order routing. There might be people on the call now that say, "Hey, I'm doing some of what you're talking about through custom development work on NetSuite." As I think we all know, NetSuite is extremely custom. I've never done a NetSuite onboarding at Flxpoint that was the same as the last one, and that's just because of how custom it is. And I mean, it's what makes NetSuite so powerful. But with kind of that customizable nature of NetSuite, it can introduce a lot of factors, right? So, a good example of using suite scripts. A suite script is just a way to automate inside of NetSuite, perform certain actions. But I have worked with developers who have developed suite scripts to do a lot of what I was talking about earlier with automating these processes. You can create a purchase order to a vendor with suite scripts. You can send it via email with a suite script. You can also auto create item fulfillments, like I was talking about earlier, once you get tracking information. However, issues with that is the scalability, right? If for every single action I want to take in NetSuite, I'm developing some sort of custom script, it becomes pretty bloated. I don't know how many times I've heard asking people questions about their NetSuite setup. Oh, I don't know. My NetSuite admin, my NetSuite developer built that years ago. I have no idea how it works. So kind of that like single point of failure is what a lot of people run into with, hey, one guy or gal set up my NetSuite years ago and I'm stuck with that process. So what that can bring is, like I said, issues with scaling, with adding a ton more drop shippers, a lot more vendors, maybe more sales channels. I have to keep adding and adding and adding to the custom development work I've done inside of NetSuite. So alternatively, and I've coined, we call this build versus buy, right? Because I could build this with my own internal developers or third-party devs, or if I really am looking for time to value, I could buy it. A process, an integration that has already happened hundreds, thousands of times, as opposed to something where I have to make a very, very custom tweak to each piece of my workflow. Time to value being the key point there of, hey, do I want to use a workflow that has already proven true and get up and running in a short period of time? Or do I want to look at each vendor individually to see, hey, how can I transmit them orders? Do I have to look at each kind of workflow individually to see how I can automate that best, or working with a platform that's done it a ton? In my eyes, it makes a lot more sense to buy in that scenario of, hey, cool, let's pay a lower fee, not have to deal with all the headaches that come with working with those NetSuite developers. Along with that, why scalability is a concern with working with suite scripts and custom development in NetSuite in general. There are NetSuite usage issues that you have to work about. NetSuite calls it governance, but you can only perform X number of actions inside of NetSuite via suite scripts before you're gated. So again, working with a system that is kind of handling all of this out of the box, as opposed to having to always be worried about, hey, am I up against my governance limits here, is valuable. And yeah, like I said, limiting the dependency on developers, right? If I have to go to a developer for every single tweak I'm making, or even an admin for every single tweak I'm making inside of NetSuite, I'm not as empowered as a true business user, right? Maybe I do want to just have a quick approval process that I kind of bake in with automation, as opposed to having to ask every single time I want something new. So again, just empowering the actual users of NetSuite to make some actions, make some decisions, as opposed to relying on development every single time. If I'm buying an app, I'm buying an integration like with Flxpoint, I know, hey, everything that is in scope with my project is covered. I don't have to go out and ask. I can focus on running my business here. And then ongoing maintenance, right? With any integration, I mean, Flxpoint at the heart of it is a automation integration company. So we know what it's about to maintain these integrations, right? If a vendor changes a requirement on you, they change a header in their API, anything like that, it can throw off your entire operation. So again, if I'm building this all myself, all of these custom workflows myself inside of NetSuite, something breaks, I got to fix it. I got to foot the bill to fix it. Now, working with a software platform, with multiple users kind of performing similar actions, A, somebody else might break it before you, and have it be fixed already. But B, knowing that a software company is going to foot the bill, take care of any maintenance that needs to be done, make sure that we're always on the latest versions of what we're doing with NetSuite is a big value add there. And then finally, vendor and sales channel connections, right? So I mentioned a few times in the presentation, there's nothing really native inside of NetSuite to connect to your sales channel. There's really nothing native outside of emails to connect to vendors. And again, so each and every one of those, I'm probably developing custom APIs, custom EDIs, custom solutions that require dev work and maintenance, like I'm talking about here. So instead of that, we like to tout at Flxpoint, hey, we can integrate any of your vendors, and a lot of times it's code free. We have tools like no code needed file mapping, right? So many times I hear a vendor can supply an inventory file via email, a CSV file over email, or put it on a shared server. Flxpoint can automate bringing that in, and again, merchandising, creating those item records on the sales channel. We also have pre-built integrations. I think this will be a huge, huge, huge win for anyone considering adding dropship to NetSuite, because we're very likely, pre-integrated with one of the distributors or vendors that you want to work with. Don't go and pay for a EDI or API integration between NetSuite and your vendor if it already exists with a software platform here. And then we also have the ability to, or I really like to say, integrate any vendor, because we can connect directly to vendors' e-commerce sites. We can connect to a vendor's Shopify store, a BigCommerce instance, connect to their Magento in order to do all the operations I'm talking about, getting inventory in, sending orders, getting tracking back. And then if all else fails inside of Flxpoint, we also have a vendor portal. It's a great place to allow vendors who don't have great automation tools in place to log in, fulfill orders for you, give you inventory updates in a small portal view. So all ways to connect to vendors, and all of them do not require API and EDI services. Flexpoint also does. We know that sometimes it is just the only way to connect to a vendor is via API, EDI, something custom dev needed. We help with that as well. But it's something where we always like to look at, hey, are there any free, quick, available options to get a vendor or a sales channel connected, as opposed to building that custom development. So, one last thing to kind of leave on with the build versus buy scenario is, having a vendor experience where I can onboard vendors all through one interface. Instead of piecemealing together, hey, this one's EDI, this one's API, this one is SuiteScript automated. I have one centralized locations where I can manage all those vendor interactions. So just a good tool to have in the belt there. Cool. So I think that brings us to a conclusion here. We got a few minutes left for Q&A, but overall, just hoping you guys gathered some good nuggets here about some of the pain points maybe you're already experiencing or could experience if you start adding dropship operations to NetSuite, and how tools can help. A tool like Flexpoint can help a ton. So before I start the Q&A, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll for everybody. Give me 1 second. So a poll should come up on your screen here, just with a couple questions. It'll just help see what boat everybody's in, right? So just some questions on what you're doing with NetSuite today, maybe some avenues for how to change things. So go ahead and take a look at that. Fill out those answers, and while we're filling those, while that poll is going, I'll start grabbing some questions from the Q&A here. Give me 1 sec. All right, cool. So first question we got, it's good. It's a good segue from what I ended with. How is vendor management handled in NetSuite and Flexpoint? Not just the sending and receiving of orders, but the management of vendor performance. It's a good question. In NetSuite, out of the box, I know you can export vendor financial records. You can like track outstanding balances and stuff like that. But it's not a true vendor portal, vendor experience. But with a unified solution of Flexpoint along with NetSuite, we can have basically a centralized vendor hub that has vendor details, the ways you're integrated with them, all those data feeds if I want to do some reviewing before creating those item records on NetSuite. So in a nutshell, there's not a lot of true vendor management, vendor performance inside of NetSuite. There's some financial exports you can take for reporting purposes. And then adding on Flexpoint to that, you get more management of your vendors. We have features like vendor SLAs where, we can go after vendors who are late to ship items out, notify vendors if they haven't fulfilled something in a certain time frame. Cool. All right, let me look at some other questions here. I like this one. Thank you, Christina. So the question, Flexpoint is the heart of our business, and we've built our entire business around it because it's fantastic. I love that. We have a brick and mortar and dropship e-commerce. What accounting software is currently the most fully integrated and automated in Flexpoint? It's a really good question. There's two that I would say are the most fully fleshed out. Christina, as you know, we have open API. There's a way to make other things happen, but it's NetSuite. That's why we're having the webinar. I feel really, really strongly about our NetSuite integration. We have, really cut our teeth on it, developing the integration, making sure it supports a good handful of customers. Like I said earlier, it's so custom. We're doing things differently each time we kind of set up a NetSuite instance. But along with that, we've developed so many features to make it easier and easier and easier. So NetSuite's our number one accounting system that we're integrated with. We also have QuickBooks. A lot of the same operations that I've mentioned here with NetSuite, they apply to most accounting and ERP systems. So for people, oftentimes at maybe a smaller scale, QuickBooks Online is a great option. Flexpoint is also fully integrated with QuickBooks, Christina. So another name to look at. Some other pre-built integrations we have for accounting ERP systems are Sage. I'll send you the list of any other ones. We can send it out afterwards. But Sage, NetSuite, we just added Exceed, which is more in the car dealership space. But in general, the workflows are the same from one ERP accounting system to another. Obviously, different terminology, different features in each, but A long-winded way to answer your question, it is NetSuite, QuickBooks, maybe Sage. Cool. See if I have any more here. All right, cool. Can NetSuite handle multiple vendors for the same SKU out of the box? So that's the concept of overlapping that I was talking about. And out of the box, yes. I mean, they can handle having you tell NetSuite, I have multiple vendors that sell the same item. What they don't have out of the box is finding that for you. They don't have a tool to go look through UPCs, MPNs, reference identifiers in general to say, hey, cool, I've identified that two vendors carry the same item, or maybe two vendors in your internal warehouse all carry this item. Let me go ahead and consider those all one aggregated item. That's what Flxpoint comes in. So Flxpoint, the view I showed earlier of the kind of digital product catalog, that can be leveraged to find overlapping items between the vendors and then tell NetSuite that. Again, cutting out a lot of that kind of manual action and processes there. All right, let's take one more here before we look at the poll. And how hard is it to onboard new vendors into NetSuite for dropshipping? That one's tricky where, every vendor's different, right? Traditionally, I know it takes weeks if there's no custom development work needed, right? I have to set up all the item records. I have to merchandise that. I have to, do some product cleanup on the vendor information. Maybe I got to set up custom scripts inside of NetSuite if I'm not using an automation platform. So yeah, it can take weeks. But even more so if we have to develop API, EDI integrations to transmit data back and forth to those vendors. So looking into pre-built options can be a huge time saver. It can take a month of development work down to a week of file mapping if we find a file-based approach there. So yeah, I think how hard is it? It's hard to answer, but I think with the presentation here, it's cumbersome for sure and very error prone. All right, I think that is all the questions. Let me see if I can take a look at this poll here. All right, so looking at the poll, question one we had, what limits your ability to start or scale dropshipping in NetSuite? And the number one answer being manual NetSuite record creation and management. So item records, order records, invoice records, the manual creation and management of all of those. I would tend to agree that my head spins when I see all the steps people have to take to create different types of records inside of NetSuite. So would agree there. That would limit the ability to really scale these operations, and hopefully we've given you some ideas for tools to combat that, automating those processes up. Cool. What is your main method for choosing which vendor fulfills a dropship order in NetSuite? The number one answer was I manually switch vendors based on stock and price. Again, that's what we've heard, honestly. It's a lot of people are saying for each order that comes in, I'm going to manually take a look at it and change it based on who has it in stock, what their price might be. So for each order, a very manual process. Again, really, really good to know that is the pain point that people are seeing because, that's where Flxpoint steps in to say, cool, let me assign this to the correct vendor right out of the gate. You're not going back and updating as much as you normally would. Cool. Last poll question. If you could improve just one part of your NetSuite dropship workflow, what would it be? And the number one answer was automated order fulfillment and customer notification. So that is getting the tracking information in from a vendor, telling that end customer, who ordered it on your website or on your marketplace, that the tracking information is coming. So again, it speaks to not having a pre-built way to communicate with each and every vendor inside of NetSuite. It comes with not having a pre-built way to connect to sales channels, needing some sort of iPaaS system, some sort of platform to get vendor data, order data to the vendors and get tracking information back and then get it to the end customer. So I would agree. I think there's a couple headaches, but that seems like it's the number one improvement is just the fulfillment lifecycle there. Cool. So yeah, like I said, I think all great questions. I'm glad the poll results kind of indicated where we were leaning with this webinar here, but hopefully you've gotten a better understanding of some of the challenges you might face or maybe are already facing, and then more importantly, ways to get around that. So yeah, if you guys have any questions for us, we're going to send out this recording to everybody who registered. But if you have any questions, please contact us. Like I said, we're going to send it out. You can email us directly. We'll give you all of the ways to contact us in our materials that we're sending out afterwards. Come visit us at flexpoint.com. You can find all the ways to connect to our team, see how we can, help your workflows. And I know with NetSuite, maybe some very specific use cases that you want to see if we can solve. We're always happy to have those conversations. So please let us know if there's anything we can help with. And yeah, without anything else, I think just a big thank you. Appreciate everybody taking the time in the middle of the day to enjoy the webinar, and hope you got something out of it. Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you guys next time.